feel like when it comes to your health, you have a lot of pieces to like this bigger puzzle, and you don't really know how they all fit together, but you just have a really good feeling that they do all fit together? Yes, I want to affirm you by saying, yes, they do. Your body is always giving you clues in lots of different ways. And I just love gathering the pieces to the puzzle and putting them together and then presenting it in more of like a case study findings to clients that I work with. And so I want to share with you a recent workshop that I did that goes through an in-depth case study, looking at blood work, looking at signs and symptoms, looking at a hair test to see how all of these pieces to the puzzle fit together and what they are telling us. So I'm going to share that with you now. I hope you guys enjoy it. All right. Well, welcome to the workshop today. My name is Kari, of course, and I'm excited to dig into this case study with you guys and just give you a little bit more kind of behind the scenes of what I do when I work with clients. And hopefully some of this, all of this might resonate with you where you're at in your health journey. If you have any questions at all on Instagram or on Zoom, I'm happy to go into more detail or try to answer your question as best I can. So let's get right into it. And one thing before I get started, if you're on Instagram, I'm sharing slides. So if you want to see the slides, I'll provide you with the recording for that after the fact. Okay, so this case study is going to be focused on a 46-year-old female that presented with the top 5 symptoms of fatigue, constipation, weight gain, really like inability to lose weight, sleep issues, and brain fog. And so fatigue, she really just had a hard time waking up in the morning, and she had an afternoon slump. Constipation, in her words, were probably a bowel movement like every other day. Weight, she's about 15 pounds overweight in her ideal weight, is about 15 pounds under what she's at. For sleep, she just had a hard time going to sleep and staying asleep. And then brain fog, obviously, she just couldn't concentrate very well. So these are a few other noteworthy things. She was diagnosed with Hashimoto's about 18 years ago, but it's fairly well managed now. Her antibodies are not that high. So that is good for her. She's also on some thyroid medication. So that's helping, kind of balance out her levels a little bit. But we'll look, when we go through the blood work, we'll talk about some of the thyroid markers. She tends to awake already feeling stressed. How many of you can relate to that? I think that's pretty common. She rates her overall stress an 8 out of 10, with a lot of it coming from work and also comparison trap. So she is comparing herself to other people. She has kind of labeled herself like a type A, right? I mean, that's like, she wants everything to be in line. She wants to, do a great job at work, at home, all the things, right? I think it's easy to fall into that. And not that those are bad things innately, but I think sometimes we can be overly focused on them. So that should resonate with a lot of you. So she tries to take a Sabbath day, but it doesn't happen a lot. And this is a question that I ask on my intake form because I feel like it's a really big deal. We all need a rest day every week. And so that's something that I always try to put a focus on. So she tries to take that, but it doesn't often happen. Typically, she skips breakfast and she doesn't snack. So she only eats 2 meals a day. And so that is already signaling to me a couple of different things. One is that she's probably not getting enough calories in, and that she is often running on stress hormones if she's not eating within 30 to 60 minutes of being awake, because that's kind of what happens, the cycle in our body. Our body has to get our blood sugar up. And if we're not giving it food, then it's going to do that with stress hormone, cortisol, and adrenaline. So that's not really helping her stressed out situation. And just a few other things that she checked that she dealt with whenever she filled out the intake form, excuse me. Bloating, obviously I already mentioned constipation, some anxiety and depression, mood swings. Obviously I already mentioned the poor sleep, brain fog, some sugar and sweet cravings. And oftentimes when people struggle with this, it's the fact that their body is telling them they're not getting enough nutrients. Like there's sort of there's a gap. There's some kind of deficiency, maybe even not enough calories throughout the day. And our body's like, I want more. And sometimes that comes out as sugar and sweet cravings, because sugar in itself is not bad. Our body needs sugar to run off of, but it's really the things that accompany that sugar, whether it's like if you're eating cookies, all the ingredients in that are just like processed sweets. It's not really sugar itself. And oftentimes people, that is one of their main issues. I already mentioned fatigue and trouble staying asleep, but she's overwhelmed easily. I would probably put that she's irritated easily too. I would fit that in there. That's probably not one of the check marks I had for her to put, but she did mention that when we talked. Okay, so we're going to dive right in. Oh, before we do that, these are things that she's tried in the past. And I know that a lot of people have tried a lot of things in the past. So I just wanted to mention these as she put these on her intake form. So she has tried macro counting. That was too time consuming for her. So she has tried that in the past. And so that means to me, like she knows she needs to get a great balance of different things in her diet, but to her, it was too time consuming. She's very busy. And she's also tried fasting, but she didn't see a really big change in that. And as I already mentioned, fasting is not going to be good for somebody that is already stressed out. She already mentioned she woke up stressed. So fasting, if she would have done that long term, it would have backfired for sure. Okay. So here are some blood work takeaways. Now, if you're looking at these slides, it might be a lot to take in, but I just wanted a visual for you, but I'm going to talk through some of these. So on a blood work panel that I do on every client, it does include a lot of the traditional markers that you might see, but it also includes a lot of extra markers that your doctor might not already be running. And so when we work together on this, I give you a list. Okay, take this to your doctor and they can run them, or I can order the blood panel for you. But looking at all of these markers are really important. Of course, I don't have all the markers right here. These are just the ones that are sort of out of range, but it is amazing what blood work can tell you. So I'm going to start with the iron panel. So on her iron panel, the only thing that was off was her ferritin. And it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece. And a lot of people automatically look at an iron panel. And if anything's off, if it's low, like low ferritin, they're most likely going to be told to take iron. And while this is a whole other conversation that could be had, this low ferritin tells us a couple of different things. And just a blanket statement before I kind of dive in on here, none of this is diagnostic. I'm not diagnosing anybody with anything. I'm just simply saying if your ferritin is low, it could be linked to these things. And what I'm doing with all of this, and why I call it a case study, is that I'm putting the pieces together. I'm going by her signs and symptoms. I'm looking at her blood work, and I'm also going to look at her hair test. And I'm going to take all of those pieces and put them together and see, okay, this is what I'm seeing. These are the things that could be going on. And here's what I think you should do about it. So just wanted to make sure you guys understand that, especially about the blood work. So low ferritin, it could mean that she has parasites. Parasites often feed on iron, which is kind of like, but that's what happens. So if it's low, could be linked to parasites. Heavy metals can often affect iron and the way it's used in our body. So that could be one correlation. And really, low ferritin does give us a clue that iron is not being used very effectively in our body. And what I mean by that is our iron should be always in this iron recycling system. But if it doesn't have what it needs to be properly recycled, it goes and stores in our tissues. And that's where we don't want it because lots of reasons. And I'm not going to go super deep into all of these things, but that is a really a good pointer, and a good piece of the puzzle to tell us, okay, her iron is not being used properly. So that's low ferritin. Her MCV is low. This could signify a vitamin C need. It also tells us that her thyroid function isn't where it needs to be. And of course, we're going to look at a thyroid panel and I'll go through all those, but these are just obviously pieces of the puzzle that we're kind of going to put together. Also, an MCV that's low could mean that she needs B12. And as we go through here, there's several different markers that tell us that her B vitamins are low. So this is just one of those markers. Her RDW is low, which typically means that the body is under some type of stress. So some of these markers are really specific and some of them are more broad. So you'll see that as I go along. Monocytes are high. So monocyte is a type of white blood cell, and it can tell us all of the white blood cells whenever they're differentiated into their little groupings can tell us what type of infection or things might be going on in your body. So if her monocytes are high, that's going to tell us that she has some type of chronic infection. That's a broad term. Or she could have autoimmune issues going on, which she does. So that kind of makes sense when we think about she's already being diagnosed with Hashimoto's. So eosinophils are high. This oftentimes is very indicative that she does have a high parasite count. Most people have parasites. You guys have heard me say this before, but this marker being high means that, this is definitely something that we need to really go after. So moving on along. So her glucose and hemoglobin A1C are both high. And these are both blood sugar markers. The hemoglobin A1C gives us a bigger picture of long-term how is her blood sugar. And glucose obviously in her blood is just like a snapshot. So both of these being high tells us that she's not really handling her blood sugar very well. Her body is having a hard time with that. And that makes sense. When we look at her hair test, it makes sense. When we look at her signs and symptoms, it makes sense because she's having trouble sleeping, amongst other things. Brain fog could even be her blood sugar is just very unstable. And that goes along with her stress level as well. It all makes sense. It also can just mean your inflammation is high in your body. Moving along, so BUN, which stands for blood urea nitrogen, is low. So this often tells us that there's some type of liver stress going on. Might mean that she needs some digestive enzymes to help support digestion. She's might be having a hard time digesting her food, which she did mention that she had bloating and she also has constipation. So that kind of makes sense. And here's B6 again. So if your BUN is low, it could mean that you might have a need for extra B vitamins, B6 in particular. Low potassium shows on this blood work. And in general, measuring minerals on a blood work panel is not the best indicator. I like to look at what the blood work says, but I also like to look at what the hair test says, because most of our minerals are found in our tissues, which a hair test is measuring, it in your tissues. So low potassium, which really was confirmed on the hair test. And oftentimes, if something's low in your blood, like potassium or magnesium, it means that it's super low, like it's really, really low if it's showing low in your blood on your blood test. So CO2 is also low. That can mean liver stress. And it can also mean that someone has a need for vitamin C or more antioxidants. So I think you can hopefully see, maybe not as much see on if you're on Instagram, but you can hear me saying, okay, there's liver stress. Okay, there's a need for B vitamins. Okay, these things start to show up over and over again. And that's really when you know that it's something that you need to focus on. Her protein was high on her blood work. That also means that your liver is stressed. It just means that when your liver is stressed, it can throw off so many different things. I think this is something that's way under talked about in the health world, is how much our liver needs some loving. Okay, so another marker that was low was ALK-Phos, or alkaline phosphatase. That can mean that our zinc is low. And again, I like to look and see, okay, what is our blood work telling us and what is the hair test telling us? So it's interesting to see correlations there. But because that is low, it also can mean that our mitochondria is not functioning properly. And mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. So if they're not functioning properly, obviously that can be a link to, okay, she's feeling really fatigued. So that was one of her top 5 symptoms. So that makes a lot of sense. And if she has this inflammation, if she has a chronic infection, obviously our cells are like not functioning where they need to be because they're very overloaded. So that makes sense with what's going on. Her ALT is low, which is a liver enzyme. So that just means that her liver's not functioning where it should. Her cholesterol and LDL and HDL are all high. Often this can mean, again, that our liver is not functioning properly. It's not functioning properly because maybe it's under stress. Maybe it's not getting what it needs to function properly. It needs nutrients to work properly. So it could be from a couple of different reasons, but that tells us, that obviously her liver is in great need of some help. Also, specifically the HDL and the LDL, when they're high, it can signify heavy metals, because if there's a greater presence of heavy metals, that can, of course, make it to where our body's not functioning properly and metabolizing the food that we give it properly. Okay, so moving on to the thyroid panel, and obviously she has thyroid issues. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these and hopefully help you to understand why you need all of these markers. Because the thing is, if you go to the doctor and they're going to run a regular blood panel, they may or may not run thyroid markers. But if they do, they're probably only going to run TSH. And while TSH does give us a little bit of information, it's like a little bitty sliver of information, because TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So this is just all it's going to tell us is if our body is telling itself, okay, you need to produce more hormones. That's really all it's telling us. And so her TSH is low. So that means that her body is sort of under functioning. It's not wanting more thyroid hormone. And a lot of times that's because it's been burnt out over time, because our body looks to our thyroid for energy. And so if it's not getting that, it's going to ask for more and more and more. And so a lot of times, if you look back, maybe your TSH has been high. Maybe your body's saying, I need more thyroid hormone because I need more energy. But if you've been in this constant state of stress, a lot of times it just gets burnt out. And so then your TSH goes low because it's saying, I'm done. I can't put out anymore. So I think that's what's going on here, because she's had this issue for almost 18 years. So if we move on down, there's a lot of different tests that you can do, like specifically for your thyroid. So I'm going to go through some of these, and a lot of hers were off. So there's high reverse TH3, and this was actually borderline high. And so when I look at a blood work panel, I'm not only looking at what's outside these boundaries, I'm looking at what is almost outside the boundaries, because if it's super close, if you were to get your blood work done in 3 months, it's probably going to be off. So I'm going to go ahead and take that into consideration. So reverse T3 is actually, if you think about thyroid hormone being active, reverse T3 is the inactive. So this just lets us know that our body is having a hard time converting inactive to active thyroid hormone. So stress can often cause this. And stress can be from a lot of different points of view. It could be from those blood sugar issues that she was having. It could be from infections. It could also be from fasting. Remember, I said she didn't really eat breakfast. So if we're not giving our body that fuel in the form of sugars, right? Carbs, protein, fat, all the nutrients that it needs, it can't convert inactive thyroid to thyroid, like the active form that we need. So I think that's a little bit of what's going on here. Also, the thyroid hormones that we checked, total T3, free T3, and 4 were all high. And all of these being high really indicates that she needs iodine. She needs iodine because she needs it so our body can convert this inactive to active, right? We have T3 going to T4 just means we need an extra iodine ion on there. And so if she doesn't have that, then her body's going to have a hard time converting inactive thyroid to thyroid, the active form of the hormone. So all of these tell us that she needs iodine, and more iodine in her diet. So that could mean iodine-rich foods. It could mean a supplement. So lastly, you can test thyroid antibodies, and hers were tested. They were a little bit high, but pretty well controlled for Hashimoto's. They can get well into the hundreds on up, but hers were 23, so that's not too bad. Two more blood work markers, if you're still with me. So LDH is low. And this signifies that she might need a little bit more B vitamins in her diet, or she might need a supplement for that. And then lastly, homocysteine. This is an inflammatory marker that can tell us if we have high inflammation in the body. It can also tell us if we have a methylation issue. And this is another this makes sense because we've seen so much need for B vitamins. This again tells us that we have a need for B vitamins. So B6, B12, and also folate. So you can see kind of the patterns that begin to happen and the things that really stuck out. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the hair test. So when you look at a hair test, things that appear high on here might not actually be high. It might signify that your body is running through them quickly. So for instance, her magnesium is above where it needs to be. It's above ideal. And so everybody has what's called a magnesium burn rate. And so whenever we're under stress, our magnesium burn rate is a lot higher than when we're not under stress. And again, stress can come from a lot of different areas, but that makes sense when we think about her magnesium is higher than it needs to be. That doesn't mean she has enough. That just means that her body's running through it really quickly. So it actually needs to be replaced. So that's one thing that I see on here. And another thing that automatically jumps out at me when I look at the top 4 minerals, which are calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium, is that her potassium is extremely low, which is fairly common, especially if somebody's been under stress. What usually happens is your sodium and potassium are very low, and then your calcium and magnesium are very high, which it sort of looks like that's what the trend is here, but her sodium is actually pretty high. It's not low like I've usually seen it in the past. And what we decided was she drinks a lot of these like energy drinks that have sodium in them, and she also eats processed foods which have more sodium in them, because if you salt your food and you cook at home, it's going to be very hard for you to overdo it on the salt. So this is most likely coming from some from the stress response, but also some from packaged foods. So that's why that's a little bit higher than we normally see it. But that looking at the hair test also just helps us to put some things together from blood work, and put more pieces together. So obviously her potassium is super, super low. So that's going to be one thing that she needs to focus on greatly, because that is all these macro minerals, all 4 macro minerals are very important when you think about functions in our body: thyroid function, liver function, adrenal function, all of these things. So getting her potassium up will then help to balance the other, minerals in her body. So if potassium is this low, you need at least 4,700 milligrams to get it up. And that might sound like a lot, but if you look at some of the more common foods, like potatoes and, different whole foods that we eat, you can actually get a lot of potassium just from your diet. I don't recommend a supplement here. And then one cool thing is that I mentioned she would need iodine from some of the thyroid markers. There were 3 different ones that signify that she needed iodine. And iodine will actually help you retain potassium, because sometimes when you eat foods and you're in this stressful state, your body doesn't actually uptake those nutrients. So adding in a low dose of iodine will actually help your body to retain some of this potassium, which is pretty cool. Okay, so one other thing that I wanted to mention on this hair test is that her iron, it looks very low on here, but you have to think about when you look at a hair test, especially the iron, it's what your body is using. So her body is actually using very little iron. That doesn't mean she needs more iron. That means she needs to help her body be able to use the iron that she has. So again, this is a whole other conversation. I've done several videos on that, but she needs to make sure she gets the right nutrients, especially like the active form of vitamin A. and a whole food vitamin C to help the conversion to get the iron back working, because right now it's stored in her tissues, which you don't want. Let's see, I'm going to go one more page over and look at the significant mineral ratios. So on every hair test, basically it takes what we see at the top of the test and puts it in ratios, because some of these ratios signify different areas of our health. And so I wanted to point out 3 on her hair test. So if you look at the calcium magnesium ratio, if it's below a 5, that can indicate that your body has a hard time managing blood sugar. And that was we already talked about that, how that was linked on her blood work. So that makes sense again, because we see it right here on the hair test under these significant mineral ratios. Also, when you look at sodium and potassium, that's called the vitality ratio. And if it's above a 5 or a 6, that can indicate inflammation and stress. And so we saw that a lot on the blood work as well. And then lastly, calcium and phosphorus. It's a little bit higher than the ideal. And this just means that the calcium is beginning to accumulate. It's coming out of her bones and into her tissues, which you don't want. A lot of times that's part of the stress response of your body. And it actually makes you less resilient to stress, because your body kind of burns out over time. And a lot of these mineral ratios will show that. And just, I guess it's just another marker to help you to see the pattern of what's going on. But those are some of the things I wanted to mention. Okay, now we're going to kind of wrap all this up. I know I've been on here for a little bit. I usually do a shorter workshop, but we're going to be done here in the next few minutes. So I want to put all of this together. So I always go back to the top 5 symptoms that somebody has given me that they are having issues with, because whenever I'm putting the pieces of the puzzle together, I want to help them get some relief of their most pressing symptoms. So I'm going to go through some of these. We're going to go through all of these, actually, the top 5, and just give you some root cause links that I'm seeing, and then also what I'm suggesting that she does, just so you can see this is how anybody that works for me, they're going to get this. So number 1 was fatigue. So the root cause issues that I am seeing, the magnesium is affecting this, because remember, her magnesium burn rate was very high. Inflammation that she has, that her blood work and hair tests were showing, is going to affect this. She's not getting enough calories, most likely, or nutrients. So she's not eating enough like real food. And also the iron issues. Remember, I told you that her body is not really using the iron that she has very efficiently. So all these things are going to affect, and there's probably more, of course, but these are kind of the top ones. So my course of action for her on these things, she definitely needs to look at how much vitamin A is she getting via food, because a lot of the times we're not getting enough vitamin A in our diet. She needs to look at replacing some of this magnesium that's being lost. And she needs to work on balancing her minerals so that whatever she eats will actually get into the cell and work, because some of these markers on her blood work especially showed that she was having a problem getting proper hydration, even though she drinks enough water. Oftentimes that's what happens. And also, of course, getting enough calories in is going to be something that she needs to focus on. That would start with eating breakfast. Okay, so next thing is constipation. So from what I saw, potassium and magnesium levels where they were at can definitely affect that. She had some impaired digestion. Some of those markers showed that. So we're going to look at that. Parasites, of course, can cause constipation. And then on her hair test and in some of the signs and symptoms, it shows that she has a slow metabolism, which can also affect our digestion. So course of action on this would be to work on potassium levels. She needs a digestive enzyme with her meals right now. I'm not saying she would always have to take that, but until we can get some of this going, and she can kind of see some movement in some of these areas, she's going to need to take a digestive enzyme and then supplement those magnesium levels. Okay, so third of her top 5 symptoms was weight. So the root cause link on here would most likely be parasites, heavy metals, and mineral imbalance. I'm saying that because these things cause stress on the body. So if the body feels like it's under stress, it's going to hold on to whatever you give it. And most of the time that's going to show up in increased weight. So the course of action on here is, of course, to address these root cause things and, balance minerals, and go through a protocol to help get rid of some of these parasites and of course, heavy metals as well. All right. Next to last is sleep. The root cause linked to this is probably blood sugar issues that I mentioned were showing up a lot. Liver is another thing that can keep someone up at night, especially between the hours of 2 and 4, because that's when our liver kind of regenerates for work the next day. That's when it kind of can be more active. And so if it's having a hard time with that process, sometimes you can, be awoken from your sleep between those hours. And also heavy metals can impact sleep because they impact the nervous system. And sometimes they can maybe make you more on edge. So it's harder to go to sleep, or sometimes you feel restless throughout the night, which she said that she did. The course of action on this would be that she needs to make sure she's getting balanced meals, carbs, protein, fat. She needs to make sure that, I'm not suggesting that she needs to go back to counting macros, but I think if you use common sense and eat more real food and make sure that you're having, a protein, a carb, and a fat, a lot of times protein has fat in it. So just making sure you're taking that into account, that's going to help on a lot of different levels. Obviously, taking some of the stress off the body, working on some of these root cause things is going to be really important. Okay, lastly, of the top 5 symptoms was brain fog. And often this is caused from impaired drainage pathways because we have our lymphatic system and we actually have a glymphatic system in our brain. And so if our brain's not draining properly, and as far as if something else is impeding our lymphatic system from working in our body, that's going to back everything up. So that could be an issue. Obviously, liver is part of your drainage pathway. Bowels are part of your drainage pathway. So if those things are blocked, everything else is going to be backed up. So that's why it makes sense that she's having that brain fog. And a lot of people do from those issues. Obviously, parasites are part of that. They're clogging the system up. But iron, the iron issue that I mentioned, that her body's not effectively using that can also cause some brain fog as well. So we're going to work on opening up some of these drainage pathways, really giving our liver some love, doing the things that are going to help move our lymphatics and help them work more properly. And of course, all while addressing these root cause issues. Okay, so this is the roadmap back to health, a very short version that I have laid out for her. We're going to focus on foundational things for 1 month, about 30 days. Foundations kind of encompasses a lot of different things, but mainly we're going to focus on her drainage pathways and really getting those, getting her liver working better, she needs to poop, right? She needs to poop every day. So we're going to work on that. And then after that, we're going to move into parasites. We're going to make sure we address those first, because a lot of times parasites can harbor a lot of other things like heavy metals or different kinds of bacteria or viruses. So you need to address those first. And then based on what I saw, she does need to go through and address the heavy metals that are overloaded. And I'm putting these into categories, but oftentimes when you're addressing parasites and metals, you're addressing other things too, because the things that we use are sort of broader in what they can help your body get rid of, if that makes sense. So like overgrown bacteria, fungus, viruses, those types of things will often also be addressed while you're going through these. And then, of course, throughout all of this, hopefully that makes sense, right? You're going to focus on the things that I just mentioned, but you're also going to be supporting your body with your diet, with blood sugar, with stress and sleep, all these things that are really going to help your foundation just to get stronger so that it can get rid of these things that are clogging up and really weighing down your body. Okay. Lastly, so where does she go from here? So I have already presented all this information to her. I've given her a very detailed protocol document with all of this laid out, with everything that she'll need to go through, each one of these protocols, how she can support her body through it, all of that. So now she can just choose to run with this. She can take it and do her thing. She always is going to have the option to message me if she has questions, if, for whatever she needs, anytime that she needs it. I respond back to via chat Monday through Friday. Or really, she can book an appointment with me whenever she needs it. So she can book one appointment, or she can she can purchase a package of 3 and then use them whenever she wants to. So yeah, I think that was all I wanted to mention on there. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was it. That was speed round. I got through it in about 30 minutes, which was my goal. I hope this was helpful. And I know it might be a lot, but I feel like it was a little bit hard to go through all of this on stories because there's just so much. So I hope this gave you a better, wider view of what a case study really entails. I hope you enjoyed the case study workshop and learned so much. Listen, I know that it's a lot, but I wanted to really give you an in-depth version of a case study and really to show you how all of the pieces fit together and what they all tell us. So I hope that you enjoyed that. I just wanted to let you know, if you find this really fascinating and want one of these done on you, right? You want me to be your detective and give you all of my findings, I would love to do that. If you want to head on over to my website, karicoody.com/work with me, you can see the various ways that we can work together. And so if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to message me. I'll put my email in the description below this video. You can always message me on Instagram. I would love to connect with you there. I just find so much joy in being a health detective for my clients and really to just help them to get to the root cause of what is causing all of these downstream issues for them so they can stop going in circles and kind of chasing their tail, and they can really have their roadmap back to health mapped out before them, and they can start that journey. So I would love to work with you in this, and if you have any questions at all, let me know. I'll see you on the next video.